You're about to sign something, or maybe you already did. Either way, you're standing at the edge of what feels like the beginning. The first real job, the first real paycheck, the first real proof that you've made it out of the waiting room and into actual life. And everyone around you is nodding like this is the moment, like you finally did something right. But here's what nobody tells you before you walk through that door for the first time. The decisions you make in the first 6 months of your career will shape the next 10 years in ways you won't be able to trace back later. Not the big dramatic choices, the quiet ones, the ones that feel like nothing at the time. If this is your first time at the Creator's Mind, stay. Richter is about to walk you through isn't motivation. It's not advice you've already heard repackaged. It's the map of the mistakes people make before they realize there's a map. Subscribe. You'll want to be here for what comes next. Here's the thing most people misunderstand about the beginning of a career. They think the goal is to prove themselves, to show up, work hard, say yes to everything, and demonstrate that they belong. And on the surface, that sounds right. But underneath that instinct is a trap so common it barely registers as one. You don't just start a job, you start building a reputation, a set of habits, and a relationship with how you see your own value, all at the same time. And if you build those things on the wrong foundation in those first months, you spend years quietly dismantling them without ever knowing that's what you're doing. What follows are the specific things almost no one warns you about before you walk into that first role. Not because they're secrets, because they're things that only become visible in hindsight, and by then, the cost has already been paid. The first thing, you will be tempted to make yourself indispensable by saying yes to everything. It feels like ambition. It feels like the right energy to bring. But what you're actually doing is training the people around you to see you as someone with no limits, which means someone they don't have to negotiate with. Every time you absorb extra work without acknowledgement, you're telling the room that your time has no price. That pattern will follow you, not because people are cruel, but because you set the precedent and they learned from it. The second thing, you'll notice early on that the people who get recognized aren't always the people doing the most work. This will confuse you, then frustrate you, then quietly break something in you if you don't understand it. Visibility is a skill. It's not arrogance. It's not politics. It's the ability to make sure that the value you create doesn't disappear into the background. Invisible effort is just effort the organization never learned to rely on. Learn to make your work legible. Not louder, just legible. The third thing, the way you handle your first mistake will define more about your future there than the mistake itself. Most people either collapse into excessive apology or harden into defensiveness. Neither one works. What actually builds trust is the ability to look at what went wrong, name it clearly, and redirect without drama. It signals something rare, self-awareness under pressure. That signal travels further than you think. The fourth thing, you will underestimate how much the culture of your first job will become the baseline for what you consider normal. The hours, the communication style, the way conflict gets handled, the amount of acknowledgement people receive. Whatever environment you walk into at 22 or 23 starts to feel like the default setting for how work is supposed to feel. Choose carefully, because what you normalize in the beginning becomes very hard to question later. Most people think the first job is just a stepping stone, something to survive until something better appears. The Creator's Mind exists to show you the part of this that gets skipped, the invisible architecture you're building while you think you're just getting through the day. The fifth thing, salary negotiation is not a one-time event. It is a posture, and most people walk into their first job having never practiced it, which means they accept the first number offered, not because they're grateful, but because they don't have a framework for asking. What they don't realize is the number you accept on day one creates the baseline for every raise that follows. Compound that over 3 years. The gap between someone who negotiated and someone who didn't isn't a few $100s, it's tens of thousands. The sixth thing, the relationships you build in the first job matter more than the title on your contract, not because networking is some kind of career hack, but because your reputation is built person by person before it's ever built publicly. The colleague who respects how you handle pressure becomes a reference. The manager who sees you think clearly under ambiguity becomes a door. You're not just learning the job, you're being observed, cataloged, and remembered by people who will be influential long after this chapter ends. The seventh thing, You will be tempted to perform certainty you don't have, to speak confidently about things you're still figuring out because the room seems to reward confidence and punish hesitation. But the people who move fastest in early careers are almost never the ones who sounded the most certain. They're the ones who asked the most precise questions. Intellectual honesty, the ability to say, I don't know this yet, but here's how I'll find out, reads as maturity, not weakness. The room responds to it differently than you expect. The eighth thing, burnout doesn't announce itself, it accumulates. And it accumulates fastest in people who care, which means the people most at risk are the ones working hardest in those first months, trying to prove something. You will feel a kind of pride in how much you can absorb. That pride will carry you further than you should go, and then one day the tank will be empty and you won't remember how you got there. Pace is a strategy. It's not laziness. The people who last in careers worth having aren't the ones who sprint the hardest in year one. They're the ones who built a rhythm they could sustain. The ninth thing, and this one lands heavier the longer you sit with it, who you become in your first job isn't just about the skills you pick up. It's about the self-concept you form. Whether you start to see yourself as someone who contributes meaningfully or someone who survives quietly. Whether you learn to trust your instincts, or whether you learn to constantly defer to others before acting. The first professional environment you inhabit teaches you something about your own value, and you will carry that lesson into every room you enter after it. Make sure it's the right one. The beginning isn't just a beginning, it's a frame, and everything you learn to see through that frame will shape what you can and can't perceive for years after it. You didn't come here to reassurance. You came here because something already felt off, and you wanted to know if you were right to pay attention to it. You were. Press like if this reached you at the right time. Subscribe to The Creator's Mind. And when you're ready to keep going, the next video is already on your screen. Richter will be there.